been able to discuss matters in Paris and also here at the White House, and it has always been a great joy to do that, and I would like to commend you. And thank you, Mr. President, for extending this friendship to France and taking part in the ceremony at Notre Dame that you mentioned before. It was a great honor for the French people to reopen the cathedral to the rest of the world, and your presence was a testament to that friendship. As the President said, this friendship dates back to the Revolutionary War, since the beginning of the United States, and whenever we've needed to, we've been able to come together and be on the right side. We've been able to be united to defend peace and sovereignty, namely in the two world wars that marked the 20th century, from Lafayette to Pershing and to the many Americans who landed on Omaha Beach. And we spoke earlier before, and you mentioned that one of those gentlemen was able to visit you here, one of the veterans. This is part of history which puts us in the world that we are in today. And as the President just said, there are many challenges in this world. And over the past few days, we have one main objective, which is the geopolitical situation. Mr. President, I really wish to thank you for making changes to your schedule to meet with us so quickly. I think we've made very substantive steps forward during our discussions, and this is a major step in what we're experiencing today. We had a video conference with all of the G7 leaders, which was an opportunity for us to discuss this matter 3 days after the Russian war in Ukraine, and to express our support for President Zelensky to the Ukrainian people, but also to speak and share about our desire for a lasting peace. This is what we have spoken about very forcibly over the past few weeks. We thought that this war was only going to last a few weeks when it broke out in 2022. We admire greatly the courage of the Ukrainian people. And Mr. President, I wish to thank you for this. You mentioned that there are responsibilities on Europe's side, and indeed, we have invested $128 billion in aid to Ukraine and the Ukrainians. Ukraine has been able to hold the front of our collective security. It's fought over these past few years for its independence and for its sovereignty, but also for our collective security, because I think that no one in this room wants to live in a world where it's the law of the strongest and international borders can be violated from one day to the next by anyone. Over the past few hours, and as you mentioned this, Mr. President, we've been able to see a few things take shape. First of all, allow me to commend you on your decision to work with President Zelensky and to conclude this agreement that's so important for the U.S. and Ukraine on rare earths, critical minerals, but also having substantive conversations with President Zelensky during this key phase of achieving this deal, which is a major commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, and I think that's very commendable. We also have a shared desire to build peace. We will have this responsibility. This is 10 years after the war started in Crimea, and then we saw the events in the Donbas region and along the northern part of the country. We want to save lives. We want to bring prisoners back and bring back families.
Well, that was the U.S. President Donald Trump and the French President Emmanuel Macron speaking at the White House. Now, though, it's time for Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Does Sir Keir Starmer think we're German by declaring reform is dangerously right-wing? Tonight, I will put that question to Reform UK chairman Zia Youssef. Meanwhile, the tyranny of Labour's overbearing state has been revealed as police visit a grandmother for the crime of criticising Labour councillors on social media. Perhaps J.D. Vance was right, as the universities that are failing the taxpayer are revealed in a list of student loan repayments. Tonight, I'll be calling for an end to their excessive subsidy. If they are no good, they should fail. Plus, as today marks the third anniversary of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, we'll be debating Donald Trump's controversial plan to bring the war to an end. State of the Nation starts now. It was in September of 2016 when the US presidential candidate Hillary Clinton made the fateful error of calling Donald Trump's base the basket of deplorables, claiming half of them were racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic and Islamophobic. That was the moment Donald Trump won the election. Joe Biden made the same mistake more recently when he said,
and just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
And Donald Trump responded exactly as you would expect.
250 million people are not garbage. I can tell you who the real garbage is, but we won't say that. How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Isn't Trump fun? Unlike old Macron, who we were listening to droning on a moment ago. Anyway, how's the Prime Minister, the Reverend Starmer, made the Clinton-Biden error?
A dangerous right-wing politics. You want to know what Farage and Reform are doing on their rare visits to Parliament? They're voting against our employment rights bill. They claim to be the party of patriotism, but they're fawning over Putin.
Well, you'd have thought if you're the party of patriotism, you would at least pronounce it in the English way. But never mind, Mr. Starmer clearly wants to grease up to Mr. Trump before he goes. Designating legitimate opposition as dangerous or beyond the pale alienates swathes of the population. The Reform Party is currently leading in the opinion polls, with some results putting it close to the share of the vote achieved by the Labour Party at the last election. If Nigel Farage ends up making a deal with the Tories, we could see a Tory Reform coalition in government the next election. So in other words, a majority of the electorate could come under the Reverend Starmer's definition of dangerously right-wing. We're witnessing the same issue in Germany following its election. Christian Democrats have ruled out a coalition with the AfD that came in second. But this means going into coalition with the party that has just lost, has just been rejected by the voters at the election. Dismissing your enemies damages you and it damages democracy, even if your concerns are justified. Politicians have to respect the electorate, but to rule out a coalition with the AfD in favour of returning the governing party to government risks boosting support for the AfD as voters begin to feel that however they vote, the same faces remain in government, just sitting in slightly different seats. And to claim that Reform, a right-leaning party that holds views shared by millions across the country, is dangerous and beyond the pale is just silly. Reform, in its previous guise as UKIP, actually fought off the BNP, and it holds democracy in contempt. It's also desperate. Reform's views are mainstream, opposing the ridiculous employment rights proposals of the hard left government that we've got. Calling them rude names makes Sir Keir Starmer simply look weak. Earlier this evening, I spoke to Reform's chairman, the very, very dangerous, watch for yourselves, Zia Youssef. I'm delighted to be joined by Zia Youssef this evening. Zia, are you a dangerous right-wing political figure?
Look, Keir Starmer's speech yesterday was confirmation that Reform is effectively the actual opposition in this country. He's terrified. You can see it in his eyes. And the reason he's terrified is because Reform is shining a bright, disinfecting light on his wretched government, and we've no intention of stopping, Jacob.
Interesting term of abuse, isn't it? What is it that you think he thinks is dangerous about you? Is it dangerous that you're in favour of freedom of speech? Is it dangerous that you think the UK should govern herself? Is it dangerous that you think we should pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's interesting that he chooses to use the word dangerous and refuses to engage substantively on issues. And the reason he can't engage substantively on issues is because he would lose decisively. Look, Labour is making the same mistake that politicians in this country have made now for years and years and years, which is essentially insulting the very people whose votes they are supposed to be trying to win. As you said, absolutely, we stand up for freedom of speech, something his government are hell for leather trying to curtail. We are shining a bright light on the appalling policies that he has enacted since coming to power, none of which, by the way, were in his manifesto, whether that's the tax rate on farmers, whether that's the increase in national insurance on employers, whether it's the desperate attempts to give away British sovereign territory and then lease it back for extraordinary amounts of money, over £50 billion over the duration of the 99-year proposed lease for the Chagos Islands. So we're going to keep making the point to the British people that this is a government that is anti-British. They hate Britain, they hate its values, and are deeply, deeply incompetent.
Do you think that Starmer is trying to associate you with continental parties such as AFD, where obviously the German political situation is so very different, but that the mainstream political parties simply won't deal with AFD and have said that they're so right-wing that they can't have any links to them? Do you think this is the attempt that Starmer is making? And do you have any fellow feeling with AFD?
It might well be what he is trying to do. It's not going to work. Those blows don't land, just like they've tried to attack us around our policy on the NHS, which, of course, is to ensure it is always free at the point of use. And, you know, since they've been making those attacks, we've only gone up further in the polls, Jacob. We are now leading in the average of the polls nationally. We're meaningfully ahead of the Tories and now ahead of Labour. So it's really clear he knows we are the biggest electoral threat to his government. They're heading for a scenario in the general election where hundreds of his MPs will lose their seats to us. And look, the AFD are a very, very different political party to Reform. We are a party that is about common sense. We don't even necessarily fit into right-wing or the old sort of left-wing, right-wing paradigm. We make our political decisions, and Nigel guides us at this party based on what is in the interests of the British people, and we're going to continue doing that.
And do you feel, though, that what's going on in Germany could be something that politicians are trying to follow here, of saying that one particular party that has got many votes must be excluded from the political process? And does it worry you that that actually may build up support for AFD, but actually, from your point of view here, may have the benefit of helping you if you're seen to be outside the normal political club?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any meaningfully useful comparison between Reform and the AFD. As I said, we're very, very different parties with actually very different policy platforms. I'll say this as well, the first past the post system, you know, the same one that has been such a challenge for Nigel throughout his career over the decades, which really penalises start-up insurgent parties. You know, you can win millions and millions of votes and fail to win any seats whatsoever. We are now at the stage of support. We're broken through those thresholds at the 26, 27% levels that we are now, where actually the first past the post system works massively in our favour. If a general election were to be held tomorrow, it looks like we would comfortably win 200 seats, which is astonishing given that we won 5 seats just 7-8 months ago, and we're about 4 percentage points, so we need to take 2 more points from the Tories, 2 more points from Labour, and we will have enough support to win a majority and for Nigel to be our Prime Minister, supported by a majority of reform MPs. So look, that's what we're going to continue doing. We're going to keep making the case to the British people that we're going to stand up for values of family, of community, of country. Our membership is going absolutely ballistic through 215,000 now. We're closing in, and I think within the next few months we will overtake Labour and become the largest political party in the United Kingdom. So we have all of the momentum in British politics, and we're going to keep going.
Momentum, a rather left-wing rather than right-wing word as it happens. But does this mean you're now in favour of the British Constitution and maintaining the first-past-the-post system, which actually does give clear governments, and once you've reached the tipping point, makes sure that parties that are popular can win an election?
Well, I think the damage that has been done to this country over 2 decades was done under a first-past-the-post system, and I think to undo it will require a party like Reform winning under a first-past-the-post system. Look, whether we like the system or not, it is the game at hand, and we're very practical and clear-eyed about that. We have set a target of winning the next general election under a first-past-the-post system, no mergers, no pacts with the Tory party. We've got to win. We've got to have a majority. I think we'll win between 350 and 400 seats by the time of the next general election, with Nigel as our Prime Minister, an outstanding cabinet of patriotic, highly competent people standing beside him, obviously flanked by hundreds of Reform MPs. It is with that decisive mandate that Reform can transform the country and undo all of the awful damage that has been done, starting under Tony Blair and sadly, actually, Jacob, continued under 14 years of Tory rule.
Well, Zia Youssef, I think you're the most dangerous person I've ever spoken to, but it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Sir John Redwood, who's quite dangerous, and the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, who I think on this scale isn't at all dangerous, because he's the lefty we've got this evening. But, Lloyd, let me ask you first. Do you think that Sir Keir is actually making a mistake in not answering what Reform has to say, but simply attacking the party, trying to paint them as if they were the BNP, which they're obviously not?
Look, I think... and I can be accused of doing this in the past, and when you lose your seat or was not able to restand, you look back and you reflect on things that you were part of in my period for 8 years. And I suspect we played the man and not the ball far too often in politics. We did it against Boris, we did it against other people, and it's being done back to Labour ministers as we speak. And I don't think it's a very healthy situation in politics. But, of course, it is a situation when you're in the heat of the moment, you use this hyperbolic kind of language about things. I think it's totally right for Keir, of course, to point out the differences. You know, kind of Reform wants some change of how the NHS is funded to an insurance-based system. We do not. Reform are against workers' rights and allowing pregnant women to have the right to have maternity pay straight away. Reform do not. We believe in a green industrial revolution that will rebuild our country. They do not.
Yes.
You know, have the arguments on the policies, and the people can then say, I like those policies. But I believe actually Labour wins, governments win, usually, although I think this time was probably an exception, when they put forward a positive view of how they want the country to work.
All right. I think Lloyd is being wonderfully pious and optimistic. Actually, I think it's always about men, not measures. It's a wonderful quotation from Canning about this, that if you have to choose, it's the men and indeed the women who determine how we're governed, and the measures come and go, they change. But mere abuse is rarely successful.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I think abuse is a very bad idea, and I do agree that Labour wanting to counter Reform have got to counter the detailed proposals that Reform have come up with and the big issues they've highlighted. I mean, Labour is losing hands down over migration. A very large number of electors want it properly controlled. They don't want the illegals at all. They want much lower levels of legal migration, and Labour is completely unable to deal with that, or sometimes it looks as if with their legal changes they want to relax it. And then if you talk about economic recovery, people are hungry for better paid jobs and lower taxes, and instead they're served up this diet of no growth and very penal taxation, which has knocked confidence and stopped business.
But doesn't Reform have a problem that even if it's saying things that we agree with on both of those, there were at the last election some pretty funny people in Reform. I mean, not always funny, but they criticised some candidate for not working hard enough who turned out to have been dead, which wasn't very clever. They had one or two candidates who'd said things in the past that really were beyond the pale of ordinary political discussion. That Reform's not free of problems of having some people in it who are deeply undesirable. Much more so than the Conservatives.
Well, that's true, but the main parties have a
but it's more of a problem. It's more of a problem.
And it's partly a problem of being at a very early stage. So they didn't have enough decent or normal people already elected or about to be elected. And so the oddballs stood out. But, I mean, Labour is finding it quite difficult to keep all its MPs recently elected because of these problems they have. Like
Simon Hart's book indicates one or two of us weren't all that we might have been. All right, I will accept that point. And come back to AFD, because I think that's really interesting, that there is a party that's now got 20% of the vote that nobody will deal with. Is that actually a sensible democratic way to operate, or is it learning the wrong lessons of the 1930s?
No, well, I think the German situation is slightly different. I think it's slightly different because the idea of the Grand Coalition is very common in Germany, and half of Angela Merkel's period was in Grand Coalition. She'd kicked out Schroeder, and then the Social Democrats went into coalition with her. So I don't think it is unusual like it is in Britain, and so I don't think you can put the British gaze on the German situation. And the other thing I think that's important is if you look at AfD and the map of AfD, or where they won, because Germany has first past the post and then it has top-up. So we can look at the first past the post bits, and it's almost completely in the eastern area, and there's almost no AfD in the western area, about one or two bits here or there. And that has always been the case, that the eastern area has voted for extremities, whether it's be the far left or the far right. And I don't think that should. We should overestimate the effect over the whole of Germany. And the rest of Germany outnumbers the East, 2 to 3 to 1.
But it does mean you're cutting out a whole area from government. And
no, they will be the official opposition. They will be the official opposition.
Yeah,
but
the
they don't
danger
have to support the
is
country.
that what's now going to happen is that Merz moved the CDU quite a long way in the direction of some of the propositions that the Alternative for Deutschland were putting forward, particularly on migration control. And then if he goes into coalition with the SPD again, who were seen to have failed on that desperately, he has to water down his proposition, and then the rest of the electorate become extremely cynical about how they never get what they vote for.
Parties do manage to change, and we saw in Denmark how Social Democrat parties learn their lessons in coalition and are able to govern quite well.
I'm worried about the Uni Party, but there we go. Thank you very much to my panel. After the messages from our sponsors, is Britain becoming, or has it become, a big brother state?
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Apparently in 1991, I took out an insurance on my computer, which I have no recollection of at all. But recently, I've had a foreign voice ring me and say, unless I pay the £1,000 immediately, they'll take it out of my bank account.
They wouldn't have access to your bank account.
No, they have no access to my bank account. And what you should do, to begin with, you feel frightened. And you think, my God, £1,000 coming up, what do I do? And then Neil, my partner, said, just ignore it. And that's what you've got to do. But they are persistent.
So threatening as well.
And we changed we changed the number and everything. And still, they managed to get through to you. And we told the bank not to accept any £1,000 checks, something like that. But it is awful. But I say to your viewers and listeners, please, please ignore these phone calls.
Yes.
Even if at the end of the day it's true and they do come and collect £1,000 legally, don't do anything about it. Just ignore it.
Yeah. I think there's an organisation you can phone which is anti-scammer.
Is there?
They can do a lot of this stuff for you. I'm no help to you because I don't know what it is.
Well, I might look into that because it is worrying, to begin with, and then they are so persistent.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
My mum had a similar thing the other day, and this is a good tip to remember. And her bank rang her up and said it was her bank, and they needed to get into her account immediately because someone had hacked her account and they were taking her money out. So it's automatically the panic.
Yeah.
You're losing money.
Yeah.
And they said, just share the one-time password that's about to come to your phone. And at that point, she went, no, you should never share your one-time password.
No.
Anybody asks you to do that, it's a scam.
No,
phone
exactly.
back. So just a good one to remember.
Yeah, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. Two troubling stories emerged over the weekend that have prompted the question whether we are living in a Big Brother state. First, we saw Apple removing the advanced data protection tool from British consumers following a row with the government because it requested the right to see users' data. Then we saw Greater Manchester Police visit a grandmother's home simply because she called for Labour politicians to resign amidst the Andrew Gwynn MP WhatsApp scandal. Well, I'm joined now by a friend of the programme, journalist and broadcaster Emma Trimble. Emma, thank you very much for coming in. Now, I accept that the act under which Labour operated to force Apple to change its operating systems was passed by a Conservative government. But it's a pretty draconian measure that they've taken, isn't it?
Enormously draconian. And in fact, this is the first time that a company like Apple have been forced to take measures like this. I actually had a look on my phone today and rightly, you actually can't put on this security feature. And so what this basically means is that previously, they had this advanced feature, which is something that you do opt into, where everything that is backed up onto the iCloud, whether it's your photographs, your messages, your user data, is in the iCloud and is encrypted. And what they've done by making this request of Apple, which Apple were reluctant to do, didn't want to do this, instead of creating a backdoor basically for the government to use, they've just gotten rid of the feature entirely for people only in Britain. But it is extremely worrying because it's not, even if this is, I'm sure they would argue, a security measure so that they can access, encrypted information from criminals, what this actually does is put the entire population of those like myself who are using iPhone, Apple products at risk of criminals, bad foreign actors. So it's a security risk and it's a seriously draconian invasion of people's privacy.
But haven't secret services, going back into the mists of time, but certainly from Elizabeth I and Walsingham, intercepted the post, broken seals, stuck them back on again, been able to get into people's communications to try and keep the nation safe? Isn't that a reasonable thing for governments to want?
True, and I believe very strongly that it's important for us to, I think security is one of the first responsibilities of government. I myself, started my career working on Islamism and terrorism. I know how important this is. But in England, historically, we have had an understanding of liberty that really, going back much earlier than other European countries, it's something that is fundamental to the political history of this country. And I think that there was an understanding of what was legitimate for the state to do and what isn't. And obviously, that is something that, in the name of security, those boundaries do get pushed. But fundamentally, this is such an invasion of people's privacy and putting them at such risk that I don't think is justified. Because it's not this is not just about criminals, this is about the entire
But you would accept
population.
that with a warrant, the secret services can listen in on people's telephones?
I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, but I do.
But that's the long-standing law, is that with a warrant your telephone can be tapped, but there has to be a reason for it.
A legitimate reason for it. But I think the problem with this particular measure is that it is generalised to all people who are using Apple products. It's not just, those who And maybe it is the case that the government have made this request because they do want to look at the information of one particular person. We don't know. But it seems to be a measure that hands over far too much power to the government.
And the risk is that if there's a backdoor, lots of people will use it, not just the government, because anything the government can work out how to do, other people will do. If there's a key to the back door, other people will.
Yeah, it's
copy
making
the key.
it's making everybody's data vulnerable because it's effectively unencrypting the storage of people's data, their messages, their photographs.
I'm worried equally, if not more, by the Manchester police. That seems to be such a fundamental attack on freedom of speech. Now, they've said they spent 6 minutes talking to this lady. That's not the point, is it? That if you tweet that some councillor who you think's behaved in a grubby fashion should resign, you must be free to say that. You must be free to be wrong and say that. And it doesn't begin to count as harassment. And the police just seem to show no judgment as to what they investigate.
Not least because Manchester police are known for having one of the worst crime rates in the country, can't solve burglaries, car thefts and that kind of thing. They have no business going to people's houses over something like this. And it seems that, in this instance, this was the partner of a Labour councillor, and this lady was just simply making a criticism of this Labour councillor. And it's not the first time that we've seen this, or we've just seen the Free Speech Union won a very important case with an ex-Marine who, after the Southport riots were happening, he put a message up online that was very clearly non-violent. He was charged for that. And when the trial was put before a jury, he was acquitted in all of 15 minutes, the common sense of the British people. And he'd been charged, I think it was, with some kind of racially aggravated public order offence. And that was because somebody from the Labour Party in Wales, an elected official, made a complaint to the police. So even going back to this story with Apple, I think the fear is that you can see the general atmosphere around this Labour government, the lack of respect for freedom of speech, and a police force in various parts of the country that are willing to do the bidding of those politicians.
That's right. The police should not be the lackeys of a socialist government and backing up socialist councillors. Just a fundamental principle.
Absolutely, and the police should know better. So when the police received that complaint, they obviously said that they needed to go to the house to speak to this lady about the complaint that had been made to them. But they should have had the common sense to say, well, this is not our business.
It's not our business.
So I think with both the government and with law enforcement, they have lost a sense of what they have authority to do and what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. And they're doing far too much of what they shouldn't be doing and not enough of what they should.
Not enough of proper policing, no. Well, Greater Manchester Police issued the following statement in relation to this case. We spoke to the woman for 6 minutes to advise she was the subject of a complaint of harassment and to answer any questions she may have. No further action is necessary as no crime has been committed. We are under a duty to inform her that she is the subject of a complaint. The genuine threats that have been made to local councillors recently have meant it's been more necessary to ensure that all reports are looked at. I don't think there is a duty to tell people if bogus complaints have been made, but never mind. Thank you, Emma. In a moment, I will be calling for the end of the payout for failure in our universities. But can you guess what percentage of graduates pay back their loans at the least successful universities?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, welcome to your winter sun forecast. Sunshine and showers for many with snow over the Alps and feeling less cold in Greece. Plenty of sunshine across the Canary Islands, feeling pleasant here, highs of 19 degrees. There'll be sunshine and showers elsewhere, falling as snow over the Alps, and across Greece, temperatures are going to be rising with temperatures up to 13 or 14 degrees. Looking ahead then, plenty of sunny spells, a few showers still around and feeling pleasant in that sunshine.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Save the Nation. The Student Loans Company has revealed that graduates from more than 100 British universities pay back less than 10% of their student loans. It's the first time a loan repayment breakdown has been properly issued and proves what we could all have guessed, that the higher education system has become a racket. Indeed, at more than 30 institutions, fewer than 5% of loans have been paid back in full, prompting the question, why are we subsidising failure? Surely it's time to let these institutions fail. Well, I'm joined now by Gareth Sturdy, co-organiser of the Battle of Ideas Education Forum. Gareth, thank you very much for joining me. This becomes a big cost to the taxpayer, doesn't it, when the loans aren't paid back? And it does seem that the best universities get the highest repayment rates. So shouldn't the worst ones simply close?
I don't think it's as easy as that, Jacob. I mean, I agree that that the higher education world has become a racket. But I think it's not just a simple case now of just pulling the plug on a whole bunch of universities. This racket has been going on for about 30 years now. And it's not going to be a simple thing to extract ourselves from this situation.
No, but in terms of a racket, the real losers are the people who are told that university will solve all their problems, it'll get them higher incomes and so on and so forth. They then go to universities that are doing a very poor job, and the ones where there's 5% repayment or low, I think you can assume doing a pretty poor job. They don't get the jobs that allow them to pay back. They've been misled. They've got this enormous debt which they have to hanging over them, even if they're not paying much of it off. And it seems to me so desperately unfair on those students.
Yes, I mean, it really is. And the problem really is that both government and universities, in fact, schools and colleges and elements of wider society have all conspired for a long time now to orientate the whole of higher education around the labour market instead of the pursuit of knowledge. And so it's become a standard thing, as everybody knows. Young people leave school and college thinking that they need to go to university if they're going to get a decent job, and that's been a lie for quite a long time. And
people are then doing courses that don't particularly give them knowledge, whereas actually, and I'm conscious I'm sitting next to a fellow of All Souls, where people gain knowledge for its own sake, they make themselves remarkably employable as well.
Well, that's also becoming less and less true as we go forward, in as much as if universities are a clearinghouse for the professional classes, then even getting a degree in say my subject, which is physics, becomes less and less about your knowledge of physics and more about just having a qualification, an accreditation of some kind. The whole of university has been oriented towards getting a job. So even in the hard sciences, in engineering, in medicine, in veterinary, in all these kind of subjects, it's become less and less about the knowledge. So it's not quite right, I think, to just say that if you go to a good university and get yourself a good degree, you're going to be fine. I think it's impossible for anyone to embark on life, no matter what job they're going to get, if £50,000 or more of debt is hanging over them, in their early 20s.
Well, thank you very much, Gareth, for being so clear about that. It's much appreciated. And in other news, despite the Labour government's promise to crack down on welfare spending, official Department for Work and Pensions data have shown the number of claimants having benefits cut after refusing work has fallen by a quarter over the past year. Well, with me now is my panel of former Conservative Cabinet Ministers, John Redwood, and the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moyle. John, let me ask you about both these issues, because it seems to me in both cases there is a terrible waste of taxpayers' money. It's the same issue that you're not checking on the universities who are getting the loans and teaching people badly and wasting money, and you're not checking on people who are claiming to be out of work but could get work. And this is deeply unfair on people who are working and paying their bit.
No, I entirely agree with you. And on the question of the universities, I think we need much more transparency. I'm very glad you're highlighting it. I think it was a Freedom of Information request that got this information out. The government should be explaining it and promulgating it, because young people need to be told that there are some courses that give them a very high chance of getting a decent job. There are some courses that lead directly to a vocational qualification, and there are other courses that do not. And do you really want to spend 3 years doing something which doesn't give you that enhancement of your career chances and saddle yourself with all that debt? And then why should the taxpayer be stuffed with it? So it's just unacceptable.
And isn't this right, that lots of people do go to universities because they want to increase their earning capacity, but actually in a lot of these places they won't be?
Well, I agree with you that there is a racket that's been created in universities where we say, if you want to earn money, you need to go to university. And the principle of universities, rather than the polytechnic, was to go and explore knowledge for knowledge's sakes. I mean, Oxford and Cambridge only latterly came to things like medicine and those kinds of...
No, they did law and religion, which were vocational, and then they went on to do medicine, which was vocational.
But instructed courses, and it was about thinking courses. And we had a system where polytechnics were the institutions where you were instructed at a very high level, and it was important. And the trying to merge everything so it's all the same, rather than saying, actually, we value this and we value this separately, has, I think, led to a blandness of university teaching that is not quite instructional, but also not quite exploring knowledge for knowledge's sake.
This was a John Major thing, wasn't it, to make all the polytechnics universities?
Yes, but I think what we need to do, as many have been saying for many years, is strengthen the vocational strand and explain to people that there are some areas of knowledge, which if you're good at it or you're trained in it, you then get a qualification which is directly applicable. And if you want to be a properly qualified solicitor, why not do a law degree?
Well, no, you can't strengthen the vocational strand if you are not also making it very clear that some of the courses that were previously done via the academic strand now need to be done via the vocational strand. If you suddenly say to people, actually, if you want to be a solicitor, you do it via the vocational strand, you will have middle-class parents up and down this country pushing their children to the vocational strand. If you say, we're just going to try and tell everyone you need to treat plumbers and builders a bit nicer so that the vocational strand is valued, I'm afraid it just doesn't work like that, because we still have a class-based system. But the other important bit about this story is the con that students were ever paying for their universities. All along, the idea was never that students would ever pay back the majority of the loan. We knew that was always the case. It was a way of moving the debt off the books of the government, putting them into private hands, and then recycling the money. It was a complete con, and this shows that it was always known it's only a fraction that's ever paid back, and is the argument why we should reduce the fees, we should scrap fees, and we should introduce a proper graduate tax where actually people who earn more pay more, and you don't have this debt hanging over you.
Well, I don't think it was meant to be a con, and I think it was fought quite hard at the time because people did believe that it was going to be a genuine obligation on the part of the student when they
Well,
had...
I said it was a con, so...
Unfortunately, we've got to move on, but I'm recalling those words, the Master of Balliol College. I'm the Master of Balliol College. What I don't know isn't knowledge, and I've always thought that was true of John Redwood. Anyway, in a moment, we'll be debating Donald Trump's controversial plans for Ukraine, as today marks the 3rd anniversary since Putin's era-defining invasion.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Into tomorrow, we can expect some more sunshine, but also a fair few showers. These could be heavy and thundery at times, but temperatures will remain above average for the time of year. And the most frequent showers often in the far northwest, where we see some occluded features moving through. Also a fair few isobars on the charts. This means it's going to be fairly blustery across the northwest to start the evening, but eventually winds will ease away. Still plenty of showers moving through here though, and still plenty of showers crossing southern counties at times. Elsewhere, there's going to be plenty of dry weather overnight, even some clear spells where temperatures may just dip away, perhaps even some patchy frost across the north by the morning. Most towns and cities, though, remaining above freezing and largely dry for many areas, but quite a different story across western parts of Scotland. Still plenty of showers moving through here, merging into longer spells of rain at times. And once again, these could be heavy, perhaps even bring a sprinkling of snow across higher ground. Fairly similar across Northern Ireland, a fair few showers moving into coastal regions and similar towards coasts of northwestern parts of England. But elsewhere, a largely dry start away from the far southeast, though, where we could just see some longer spells of rain through the morning, once again turning a little bit heavy at times. This will eventually clear away and we'll see a continuation of the showers moving through into the northwest, and for a time there's going to be lots of dry weather around, but into the afternoon a fair few showers once again bubbling up across the rest of England and Wales, and still a little bit breezy around northwestern coasts, but elsewhere lighter winds, plenty of dry weather and also some sunshine, and a slight dip in temperatures compared to today, but still above average for the time of year, highs around 10 to 11 Celsius. A different story on Wednesday, another unsettled day ahead, longer spells of rain skirting their way eastwards across the country, heavy at times, once again bringing in a risk of thunder and turning into quite a windy day too, particularly around exposed coastal areas, but high pressure building towards the end of the week, which means lots of dry weather on Thursday and Friday and even some sunshine, but it will be turning cold overnight with some morning frost.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today marks the third anniversary since Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and it now seems that the war could be about to end. Donald Trump's plan for Ukraine has drawn criticism, with many arguing it amounts to turning Ukraine into an economic colony. But perhaps even more concerningly, he and Elon Musk have resorted to calling Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator. Well, my panel is still with me, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. John, the one thing to me that seems to me absolutely essential is that Putin must not win. That the lesson of history is that if bad men win wars, they fight more wars. And I'm therefore very worried about Donald Trump, who I otherwise am very sympathetic to, is going down a route that makes it look as if Putin might have won.
Well, that is a good fear. And I think because President Trump has started with trying to get Putin round the table, it appears that all the concessions are being made to Russia. But in order to get Ukraine properly round the table and willing to discuss peace, he's got to balance it up. So I'm hoping there's now going to be another version from Trump saying to Russia, beware, this is something you now have to take seriously. Because I do think it's a good idea to go for peace. We've had 3 years of a brutal and dreadful war. And the truth is, Jacob, that the West wasn't prepared to put enough resource in to give the Ukrainians a reasonable chance of winning, although they are very brave and very determined. And so dragging it on is not helping anybody.
No, indeed. But it's how you end it that is the question.
And that's why Trump has got to be at least balanced if he wants to be the great peacemaker. And we're seeing the same problem in Gaza, where if you go too far on one side, then the other side says, well, we're out of here. We're going to carry on with the war. So he's got to be very clear that unless he finds something for Ukraine, meeting your point that it mustn't just be a Russian win, then there's not going to be a deal.
And what can the UK do? What realistically can we do? Because Starmer's making great statements, but our military's been run down, our defence spending is not what it used to be as a percentage of our national income. Are we slightly grandstanding?
Well, I think that at this stage everyone is grandstanding, aren't they? You know, kind of Russia and Trump are all grandstanding. They're laying out their stalls. You're right, we can't allow Russia to win on its terms, but we have to have peace. We should have done this about a year ago, where the lines have been broadly the same now for over a year in where the front lines are. They've moved a little backwards and forwards, but not much. And we should have saved lives and played hardball then, but we didn't. And part of that is because we have this diplomatic approach that is to the first thing to do is cut off diplomatic relations. And the last thing to do is regain diplomatic relations. Trump is turning that on its head, and he's saying, actually, the first thing I'm going to do, even if I hate you, is still have diplomatic relations with you and talk to you. I do think, however, unless he gets the Ukrainians on side, they'll just keep fighting a war. It might be skirmishes, it might be a resistance, it might be... But you will not find peace in Ukraine unless you get the Ukrainians on board.
That's always the difficulty of invasion, isn't it? That the domestic population doesn't sit there quietly, it resists, and that could happen in the 20% of Ukraine that has been taken by Russia if Russia thinks it can keep it.
Yes, it could do, and nobody is suggesting this is easy, but I think there is general agreement, well, we've heard President Macron agreeing it, that this is an opportunity for peace, and so now you've got to balance it up and try and make sure that it's worthwhile for Ukraine, and Ukraine is properly supported, and there are going to be very big issues about what kind of security guarantees can be offered to Ukraine, because it's quite obvious that most of the big Western powers don't want them to become members of NATO, because that's a very direct link into a Russian war.
And nobody other than the US has the capability of giving them a security guarantee. We could give them a security guarantee, but that wouldn't particularly frighten Putin, would it? Unless we back it up with Trident.
Well, I don't think you want to underestimate the powers that the collective Western countries have, excluding the United States of America. There's very considerable firepower, and surely the argument we're having at the moment, where most people now seem to agree we need more defence capability, has got to be brought forward and done very quickly.
Well, the problem that we have with Trident is it's inextricably linked into the American systems, and it's not really a true independent deterrent, unlike the French. So we would have to rely on a German Franco kind of force. And I do think that there is an argument to say the only way that I can see this settling is if Ukraine is either in NATO or is effectively in NATO. Bearing in mind, Ukraine already has a security guarantee from the US and Russia when they gave up their nuclear weapons.
But that turned out to be worthless.
It's totally worthless. And so, therefore, it can't just be a security guarantee and you remain neutral, because that will just be a time for Putin to build up troops on the border and move in. It has to be, we will do something more.
To bring a country into NATO when it's already at war means you're at war.
Well, I don't think it necessarily means full NATO membership, but what I mean is as close as to say we will man those green lines. Now, I'm not sure that there is much appetite for British public to send British troops there. That's the problem that you get. Starmer, Keir can talk all he wants about we'll send British troops there. There is no stomach for the British people to send people into a live war, and I think Britain would turn against that idea quite quickly.
No, I think he's quite wrong to say that, and I think the right answer is when there is a defined peace or ceasefire, and if there is then a need for some kind of force... Which is what he did say,
to be fair. Yeah.
Then you might have a look at it. But I also think a bigger contribution should come from France and Germany, as they are very integrated with the EU, and in part it's about EU membership.
All right. Well, there's another reason we must leave the ECHR, which I was going to tell you, but I've run out of time, so I will tweet it. Anyway, thank you to my panel. Up next, it's the great Patrick Christys. Patrick, what's on your programme this evening?
Well, Keir Starmer says that right-wing politics is a danger to Britain, but under Labour, police knock on your door if you say that Labour politicians should resign. Is he really the danger? The fire brigade is apparently too male and white, and an illegal migrant stabbed his wife to death, but we can't deport him to Turkey because his in-laws might be angry with him. It's all to play for tonight, Jacob.
That's all extremely interesting. We want a fire brigade that can put out fires and can tell us that the sun will be shining in Somerset, because it will be. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation, and it's lovely weather in Somerset, whether you've got a fire or not.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Into tomorrow, we can expect some more sunshine, but also a fair few showers. These could be heavy and thundery at times, but temperatures will remain above average for the time of year. And the most frequent showers often in the far northwest, where we see some occluded features moving through. Also a fair few isobars on the charts. This means it's going to be fairly blustery across the northwest to start the evening, but eventually winds will ease away. Still plenty of showers moving through here though, and still plenty of showers crossing southern counties at times. Elsewhere, there's going to be plenty of dry weather overnight, even some clear spells where temperatures may just dip away, perhaps even some patchy frost across the north by the morning. Most towns and cities, though, remaining above freezing and largely dry for many areas, but quite a different story across western parts of Scotland. Still plenty of showers moving through here, merging into longer spells of rain at times. And once again, these could be heavy, perhaps even bring a sprinkling of snow across higher ground. Fairly similar across Northern Ireland, a fair few showers moving into coastal regions and similar towards coasts of northwestern parts of England. But elsewhere, a largely dry start away from the far southeast, though, where we could just see some longer spells of rain through the morning, once again turning a little bit heavy at times. This will eventually clear away and we'll see a continuation of the showers moving through into the northwest. And for a time there's going to be lots of dry weather around, but into the afternoon a fair few showers once again bubbling up across the rest of England and Wales, and still a little bit breezy around northwestern coasts, but elsewhere lighter winds, plenty of dry weather and also some sunshine, and a slight dip in temperatures compared to today, but still above average for the time of year, highs around 10 to 11 Celsius. A different story on Wednesday, another unsettled day ahead, longer spells of rain skirting their way eastwards across the country, heavy at times, once again bringing in a risk of thunder and turning into quite a windy day too, particularly around exposed coastal areas, but high pressure building towards the end of the week, which means lots of dry weather on Thursday and Friday and even some sunshine, but it will be turning cold overnight with some morning frost.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of two big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have two prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's. Tonight,
We don't show a path to the future. Others will fill that void. In fact, they already are. A dangerous right-wing politics.
Keir Starmer says it's dangerous to have right-wing views.